Josh Silver, Executive Director of freepress.org, who will be convening their annual Media Reform Conference June 6th to 8th in Minneapolis, Minnesota. We'll talk about how the media is broken and what it may take to fix it. So let's get to it. Let me bring in Josh Silver. Before, let me tell you a little bit about him. Josh Silver, as I said, is the Executive Director of Free Press, a national nonpartisan organization that he co-founded with Robert McChesney and John Nichols. They founded it in 2002, the purpose to engage citizens in media policy debates and create a more democratic and diverse media system. And if you recall, the last time that the FCC attempted to change the rules on media consolidation and make it easier for conglomerates to own multiple media outlets in the same city, the citizens beat that back, and Free Press was one of the big players in making that happen. Turns out that the FCC just went and passed basically the same thing again, and that battle is ongoing right now as we speak. And one of the two houses, the House, I believe, already came out against that FCC change, and I think the battle has now moved to the Senate. We'll talk about more of that with Josh. Prior to that, Josh Silver was the campaign manager of the successful ballot initiative for clean elections in Arizona, a cause near and dear to my heart and the heart of anyone who really cares about democracy. That's clean money elections. He was also director of development for the cultural arm of the Smithsonian Institution, which surprised me. And he's published extensively on media policy, campaign finance, and other public policy issues. And Free Press is the convener of a national conference coming up June 6th to 8th in Minneapolis, which is their annual Media Reform Conference. Josh Silver.
Thanks for having me.
Okay. Let me ask you, first of all, how did you and Robert and John come to found Free Press?
Well, as you know, those guys have been great advocates for many years for better media, more critical journalism, more accountable journalism. I was astounded in 2000 when George W. got elected to the highest office in the country, and was literally trying to figure out how the heck this had happened. And I started reading and read one of McChesney's books and realized that 70% or so of the American public were getting their primary news and information from commercial television, and B, that the media system itself was built on media policies made in Washington, D.C. primarily in the public's name, but without the public's informed consent. And it became very clear that in order to fix the media, we have to get the public involved, sort of take the spotlight of public scrutiny and shine it on the corrupt process that is currently making media policy and has brought us this dysfunctional and bankrupt media system, and actually turn media into a bona fide movement like the environmental movement or civil rights. And that's what we've been working to do over the last 5 years since we started Free Press, and it's actually going quite well. You mentioned in the intro, I mean, we saw in 2003 the Bush administration tried to let the largest media companies get much bigger, and 3 million people said no, right-wingers, left-wingers, the National Rifle Association, MoveOn.org, and we actually saw those rules rejected by a federal court in 2004. And as you mentioned as well, you know, when the Bush administration tried to do it again this past December, albeit a lighter version, a more tolerable version of media consolidation, we saw that actually the Senate nearly unanimously vote to overturn those media rules at the FCC, and now the action goes to the House. But the point is that millions of Americans are finally waking up to this crisis that is the American journalistic system and the American media, and are starting to take action, realizing that it holds the key to advancing any issue that they care about.
Okay, let me, if you will, indulge me in this. I was thinking about how to proceed, and it struck me that very much what I'm interested in is how are things broken and how we can fix them, right? So I'm wondering if we could frame this conversation in two parts. First, you'd have about 10 minutes on how is it broken, and second, 10 minutes on how we could fix it. Now, obviously, to do this in less than half an hour is impossible. You could hold a 3-day conference every year and still just scratch the surface, right?
Hey, I appreciate the plug for our conference in Minneapolis next week. Thank you.
So if we both agree an informed citizenry is essential to successful democracy, and any number of studies could show us the same thing that stimulated you to join with Robert and John to start this in 2002, that we do not have one now, how is the media broken?
Well, let's look at some recent examples. Let's see. In the past month, we've seen some pretty staggering revelations. Today, we saw the former White House press secretary, Scott McClellan, say that the news media were complicit enablers, quote unquote, in the White House's, quote, carefully orchestrated campaign to shape and manipulate sources of public approval in the march to the war in Iraq in 2002 and 2003. 2 weeks ago, the revelation that the U.S. Pentagon had been training military analysts, about 75 of them, who made 4,500 appearances in the mainstream media over the past 7 years, posing as independent analysts, but actually most of them parroting White House talking points. We saw the apologies by the two most reputable newspapers in the country, allegedly, the New York Times and the Washington Post, apologizing with mea culpas for their failure to cover the weapons of mass destruction rationale for getting into the war in Iraq in the first place. We saw the video news releases in 2005 where the government was literally sending television news stations propaganda that they were then airing as genuine news.
And let me just expand on that one a little bit for listeners, which is this is a practice. This practice of sending out video news releases is a practice that corporations have been using for years. Local news especially has hours to fill every day and only so much in terms of a budget. So if you send them something that they can basically put on the air that looks like news, that has some sort of expert and some nice B-roll running behind it, you can get most anything you want in the air. The Bush administration put the government in that business and luckily got caught.
Yeah, and that was 2 months after they'd gotten caught having what we call payola pundits, guys like Armstrong Williams, who received $240,000 from the Bush Department of Education to promote Bush's No Child Left Behind Act without disclosing when this guy Armstrong Williams and about 8 other pundits were doing newspaper columns and speaking on TV and radio, not disclosing that they were actually receiving government funds, your tax money, to shill for these White House policy initiatives. So you see this pattern of complete abandonment of journalistic principles. It's happening across the board in this media system that is highly concentrated. It's owned by a handful of giant multinational conglomerates. And you scratch your head and you say, well, like you had asked me, what's wrong with this picture?
How did this happen? Yeah,
and what you find is actually very simple. The behavior of the largest media companies, which control certainly most of what all Americans see and hear and read every day, are acting in a highly rational manner. Their job is to increase profits and increase shareholder value for their shareholders. So when you do that, you do a series of things that all lead to bad media and bad journalism. One, you cut newsroom budgets because investigative, hard-hitting journalism takes a long time, it takes a lot of staff, and it's very expensive. It's a lot cheaper to send a news crew to cover Britney Spears or to pick up a Newswire feed, but God forbid you actually do investigative journalism like what uncovered Watergate or anything like that, because that's costly. Number two, you're going to actually avoid highly controversial issues that could create too much of a stir and scare away advertisers, because suddenly advertising revenue becomes far and away the most important thing that you can possibly garner, and advertisers are thus inclined to want to advertise their hot dogs and their sports equipment next to things that are more kind of benign and less intense than, say, the uncovering of the fact that the president and his cabinet has actually led the nation into an illegal war.
Let me cut in quickly for two things about that. One is that what you've just said basically is that how does a newsroom, how does a news system grade itself? And I think what you're saying is that now it's graded by how many advertising dollars it generates, and that is the number one evaluation of whether you have a successful news bureau.
Actually, it's not only number one, it's the only thing.
It's not.
No, it's the only thing. The only thing that matters in the commercial media is how much money and how much revenue your show brings in, whether it's a news show or whether it's American Idol.
And the second thing I was going to say is that I've been told by journalists, and I'm sure you know this as well, that basically you focus group and you ask people, what would you like the news to be? You know, we're running up to a war. What would you like to hear? We've been attacked by terrorists. What would you like to hear? And basically, that's what you put on rather than what you need to hear.
Right. And that also gets to that question of why is it that in Europe, when the television news covers, say, the war in Iraq, they actually show dead people and they show maimed children, whereas we've seen our mainstream media, particularly television, has been completely sterilized because they say, well, that's not what people want to see. It's too rough. The number three thing is when you look at how concentrated the media is and you realize that the media system is created by and built upon government policies made by the Congress and the Federal Communications Commission, you see a very easy-to-trace trend where the media companies cozy up to the policymakers and the politicians in order to curry favor and get what they need, which are policy favors worth billions of dollars. That's B like boy. This is serious money, and they have a disincentive to covering politicians with a sharp knife and really digging into what's actually going on.
Right, and that one is the one that I think people might not quite get that connection. But what you're saying is, let's say you are the Tribune Company, and you want a waiver that will allow you to have own a newspaper, the LA Times, and a TV station, KTLA, in the same city. I was wrong about KTLA, I think, but one of the major stations, and you need that waiver. Well, how likely are you to take battle with the federal government from whom you need that waiver? And as corporations as journalism has been bought by commercial corporations, again, we said the only thing that matters is ratings and advertising dollars, and here the only thing that matters is what's good for the corporation as a whole. About the media conference, if someone cannot get there now, it's only a week and a half from now, and they're listening to us in LA and they can't do it, are they going to be able to get access to some of what goes on by going to your website?
Absolutely. In fact, it is actually freepress.net, N-E-T.
Oh.
We'll have org soon, don't worry, Terrence. But, yeah, in fact, thanks to our friends over at Free Speech TV, there will be live video streaming of the conference, of the key sessions. And after the conference at freepress.net, you can also find all of the conference panels and plenaries in audio and some in video, so you can really follow it online.
Fabulous. So that's freepress.net. If you can't be there, you can still be there.
Right.
Okay, so 1, cut newsroom budgets. 2, avoid controversial issues. 3, don't cross the government if it might hurt the corporation. What else?
Well, the last one that's really bears mentioning here is the 24-hour news cycle has created a pathological obsession with getting news first. And what we see is when you talk to, say, White House press reporters who covered the White House, especially in 2000 to 2004, they always talk about the fact that they felt the need to cozy up to government officials in order to get the leak, in order to get the scoop, so that they could break the news first, because that brings eyeballs, that brings ratings, that brings more advertising revenue, and that is really what leads us to how are we going to fix it? Because I think that's your next question.
It is. You're right. It's 20 after, and you've got about 9 minutes now to tell me how are we going to fix it. You're doing great, Josh. Thank you.
Well, so here's what we need to do. I mean, there's basically our rear guard battle, which is very important, which is trying to improve traditional media and make it serve us better. And that means doing things like stopping further consolidation of media ownership and further breaking up the largest media conglomerates. It's doable. There's will for it in Congress. There's increasing understanding both from the left and the right that having media owners in New York, or all due respect, L.A., owning small papers and small TV and radio stations in the heartland is not a good thing for localism. But we need to support, of course, low-power FM radio stations, community television stations. We have to make sure that postal rates stay low for independent print material. But at the same time, The real profound fight that's going on for better media right now is around the Internet. Because what most people don't realize is that in the next few years, all television, radio, phone service, web, and emerging technologies will all be delivered into your home through a high-speed Internet connection. And most people don't realize that's true. It's not a theory. It's actually legislated by the U.S. Congress, and it's going to happen. So let
me ask you a quick question, Josh. When you said legislated by the U.S. Congress, do you mean that this switch to digital, this switch to high def, is a precursor to an inevitability that's also in that legislation?
That's correct.
Okay.
The U.S. Congress has mandated that next year, 2009, that the broadcasters who are sending over-the-air signals currently in an analog signal are going to go digital. And that's going to expedite this process. But here's where it gets interesting. The cable and phone companies control 98% of the high-speed Internet connections to homes across the country. They are trying to do something called net neutrality. They want to abolish it from the law books. And you might have heard about this debate last year. And essentially what they want to do is turn the Internet into something more like cable TV, where they can slow down content, block it, charge you more to send your website, and slow down others who don't pay. They want to create fast lanes and slow lanes. And this is a profound debate because if they win, we are going to see the promise of the Internet, which is every website could be a TV network or a radio network, and it could completely blow open the entire access and distribution of media content. That could happen, or the cable and phone companies could have their way, and they can set up toll booths, and they can take control of the Internet, and it's not some kind of conspiracy theory. It's already happening.
Yeah, let me just jump in again. Where I learn about this on a daily basis is freepress.net sends out a daily digest. How can listeners who have gotten interested so far in actually becoming more active, how can they subscribe to that?
Super easy. You just go to freepress.net and you look in the upper right-hand corner. You put in your email address and your zip code, and you immediately get either the daily digest, which you describe, or a more occasional email with updates and actions to take action on media reform.
And just to tell people what this daily digest does is I end up getting links to probably about a dozen articles that are from the technical press, from the media press, from the Columbia Journalism Review, from the mainstream press, that are telling me the key stories that are going on in the media that day, and you will hear about net neutrality every day. Now, net neutrality is something which, as you've just described, is not something that's on everyone's radar. It's not something that sounds hot and sexy. And I want you, if you'll indulge me, to one more time tell listeners what that would mean. In other words, how would what I get be different if they're able to do away with net neutrality, if they're able to set up, as you said, fast lanes and slow lanes? How would that affect my life?
It's pretty simple, actually. Under the current law, and it's law that's carried over since the beginning of phones in the 1930s, which basically was a law that said, hey, if you have a phone line, nobody can tell you what to do with it. You can use it as a modem, you can talk to your grandmother, and heck, you can even use the wire to hang your bananas in your kitchen. It doesn't matter. Same law applies to the Internet, which basically says that no matter who you are, whether you're Terrence and you got a radio show, or you're my grandma, or you're Google, if you want to start a website, say you want to share video, that your website is going to be uploaded into the Internet at the same speed, no matter who you are. What the phone and cable companies are trying to do is eliminate that protection and make it so that they can say, well, Google, you have to pay this premium to have your content move fast, and you know what, Grandma, so do you. And if you don't, your website is going to move really slow and be downloaded very slowly by everybody, so you better pay the piper. In other words, they're double charging you to both move your content quickly if you have a website and charging you a premium if you want to download content quickly.
Oh, so in other words, right now I pay a price for my I get broadband through a cable company. What you're saying is that cable company will very soon, if they get their way, send me a little note that says, would you like it faster? And what they really mean is, would you like it as fast as you get it now? And are you willing to pay for that? Because otherwise, you're not going to get it as fast.
Yeah, exactly. And if you have a website that you built yourself and you're sharing information, you got your own blog, you better pay them extra if you want to make sure your blog gets downloaded as fast as ABC.
Now, it reminds me a little bit of what just did happen with postal rates, which was that the big players got their postal rates lower than the small ones. So if you're sending junk mail, for instance, junk mail, which basically bad for the environment, bad for everything, you keep a very low rate. But if you're sending the Nation magazine, you don't have enough circulation that junk mail has, you end up paying a higher rate of postage.
Right, and then so bringing this back home to why it really matters. I mean, let's remember, in 2000, when George W. Bush beat Al Gore, he got about a little over 50 million votes nationwide. And guess what? The vast majority of the people that voted for George Bush were getting their news and information primarily from Fox and from Rush Limbaugh and from a bunch of heavy, radical right-wing commentators, as well as the sort of neutered media that we're seeing now from the networks and CNN, which is not a whole lot better very often. And what we're talking about is if we can get the kind of internet that we are trying to fight for at freepress.net, we can make it so every website can be a TV or radio network, and that those regular folks out in the heartland across the country will have a huge, vast choice of different news outlets rather than what they currently have, which is generally you turn on your TV and you've got 3 or 4 choices for news. And guess what? One of them's CNN, one of them's Fox, and you watch them all day, and you have no reason not to vote for someone like George Bush.
Right. By the way, Josh, I point to the 2004 election as even more obviously pointing out this problem, because in 2000, people, wherever they got their news, they might have been able to buy the I'd rather have a drink with George Bush than Al Gore and make their vote that way. But in 2004, what we found, I believe, was that when you polled Bush voters, a huge percentage of them believed that Saddam Hussein had been involved in 9/11, and a huge percent of them, even in 2004, still believed that there had been weapons of mass destruction. That to me was the election where misinformation carried the day, and that's the day that I said we no longer have a functioning democracy.
The statistic was 70%. It was a University of Maryland poll, and it was staggering, and it was reinforced by a Pew study, which came soon after, which showed, surprise, those who watched Fox News were the most misinformed about those issues of any viewers in the country. And guess what? Network news watchers and CNN news watchers were not very far behind. So it really gets back to this issue that if we're going to have a democracy where people participate and make smart decisions, we need to have critical journalism. Bill Moyers, Phil Donahue, Ariana Huffington, Amy Goodman, a long list of great speakers are going to be at the National Conference for Media Reform. You can catch it at freepress.net. It starts June 6th, and everyone should check it out and come to Minneapolis if you can.
Okay. Again, the website, freepress.net. I recommend go up in that right-hand corner and sign up for that daily digest. It's a very worthwhile. They do the filtering for you and let you know what you need to learn if you care about media in this country. The conference is Minneapolis, June 6th to 8th. Thank you, Josh Silver. Keep up the good work.